problem I have with yoga is being regular enough on it. You know, when you learn some asanas, I'm going to do this every day, right? And then you have to do this every week for sure, at least annually. So how many practice their yoga every day? Whoa. And how long have you been doing this?
About 10, 12 years. I can't put it on a specific day.
Uh-huh.
I know when I started teaching.
Uh-huh. So you teach as well as, uh-huh. So you keep up for your own practice. And Nikki, how about you? How long have you been? Good. So it's very laudable to be so steady. One of the challenges for yoga practice is that you need to make the time and have the place and be in the mood also, right? At least for me. And if there's something else to do, a habit, yes, this is the key. Okay. So I'm sure those of you who are practicing yogis have heard about the yoga ladder. In India, there are 6 traditional philosophies or schools of philosophy. And the first one is called karma mimamsa, which is understanding that our actions produce reactions. Karma. That's the foundational study of spirituality. And then the next is called nyaya, or logic. So having understood that there are actions and reactions in our lives, by logic we can begin to understand that there are reactions that we're experiencing now from past lives. I always used to wonder in Sunday school, why does God, the all-benevolent and all-powerful God, allow some people fine situations and others difficult situations from birth? You know, if he's all-powerful and all-just, everyone should have some equity. And why do those who suffer have some kind of, lesser support from the Supreme? So until I understood karma, I could not understand that question. But the Bhagavad Gita, the textbook of yoga, answered that question for me and has inspired me all these years. But the question of karma shows up in our birth. Why are we born this way or that way? We didn't fill out a form. We didn't fill out a certificate, gender, nationality, ethnicity, health. We just got what we got. So by logic, we can understand that this karma is going on from life to life. We have some past actions which are bringing current reactions. So the third school of philosophy is called Vaisheshika. So Vaisheshika means that we understand that everything we see around us is composed of atoms. So there are atoms in this book, table, this napkin. Everything is atoms, but it looks like something else. It looks like something tangible. So at the base level, it's just atoms, but the appearance is a napkin, right? So Vaisheshika philosophy teaches that yes, if you analyze everything, it's just atom, and all of the forms that the atoms take are therefore an illusion. They're not really. There is no eternal napkin. There's just this assembly of atoms. So after the Vaisheshika study is what's called the Sankhya, or the understanding of yoga, or of this world in analytic terms. It takes these atomic elements and divides them into 24 basic categories. We don't have to go into all of them, but the gross ones are earth, water, air, fire, and ether. Ether being basically the space between other things. And the subtle elements are 3, the mind, intelligence, and ego. So we'll get back to that in a moment. But this is Sankhya, where the atoms are collated and categorized in these various ways. And then after understanding that the illusory nature of this world and its various categories, then comes Patanjali and the yoga philosophy, the yoga school. So the purpose of yoga is deepening our spiritual understanding, our understanding of that part of us which is subject to the karma of past lives. In other words, the eternal or the lasting part of us in this temporary physical frame. And, Patanjali teaches the yoga in a systematic way, starting with the exercises with which we are all familiar. In addition to the exercises, then there's meditation, there's dietary issues. The idea is to create a vessel in this body which is so compatible with spiritual realization that one will naturally gain insights. So this is the purpose of yoga. It's more than, what is it, Pilates? It's a great exercise system, but it has a deeper purpose than just putting this physical body into shape. So the sixth and final school is called Vedanta. Veda means knowledge and Anta means end. So the conclusion of these six schools is in Vedanta. Vedanta means understanding scientifically how the spiritual part of our existence differs from the physical, and what is the position of that spiritual part. What is the activity? What is the constitutional position? What is the inherent nature or dharma of that spiritual being that we are? So in a word, the spiritual being or spiritual part of our existence is meant for seva, or service. We are by nature servants. This we can see even in our physical existence. If we're in family life, we're serving the families. If we're employed, we're serving the boss. If we are renting, we're serving the landlord. Whatever it is, we are serving constantly. Like Bob Dylan said, the song from my era, back when music was good. You got to serve someone. So, Vedanta means to come to a clear understanding of the spirit and its nature, and to experience joy through the vehicle of the spirit instead of through the body. So part of our challenge in yoga, of course, is to get the joints loose and get the body flowing and the chakras aligned, because otherwise the body gives us a lot of trouble. And in fact, if we think about it, the body is just an outstanding vehicle for suffering, isn't it? Like, how much pleasure can you get from your little finger? How much joy can it bring you? Maybe if you're a pianist and you get high notes or something. But in general, it's kind of just there. But as far as suffering is concerned, oh my goodness, so many ways. You can cut it, you can burn it, you can smash it, you can put bamboo under the fingernail. So much pain from the same little entity. So this is the nature of our physical existence. It's really a great vehicle for suffering. But as far as enjoyment is concerned, it has a very limited bandwidth, a very limited range. So Vedanta teaches us that to get a lasting and deeper pleasure in life, we need to nourish the spiritual side of our existence. The body has to be dealt with, but it is the spirit that is the key to greater enjoyment in life. And this is the purpose of yoga, to bring us to a platform of perpetual happiness, sustainable bliss, and fulfillment beyond that which can be experienced in the body. After all, if our purpose in life depends on our physical vehicle, we all know how it's going to end, right? It's only a question of how and when, not if. So Alexander the Great had a case of syphilis, or something that the physicians could not cure. Despite having conquered all of these countries, at the end of his conquests, he was suffering in his deathbed. So he called his ministers together and said, "When I die, here are my instructions for my funeral. I want that my body should be placed on a palanquin and carried by 6 doctors. And I want that my palms will be open to the sky. And then behind the procession, I want gold coins and jewels thrown to the people in the crowd." His minister said, yes, Your Majesty, of course, we'll do that, but can you tell us why? He said, I want everyone to see that although I conquered the greatest kingdom in the history of the world, I left this world with nothing. And although I had the greatest physicians in the world to help me, they could not cure me. And although I accumulated so much money, it ended up being enjoyed by others. So on the bodily platform, this is our inevitable end. We won't be cured, and all that we work for will be enjoyed by others, and we take nothing with us. So in Vedanta we learn, therefore, ubayor api dristontas in the Gita, which is the essential book of the Vedanta philosophy. The teacher, Lord Krishna, says that those who discriminate can tell the difference between the temporary and the eternal. The example is given that someone may have a beautiful bird and a beautiful cage for the bird. So they say the cage is jeweled and it's made of gold and it's very beautiful. So the bird owner spends all of his time polishing the cage. Meanwhile, the bird inside is not getting food, it's not getting water, and so the bird expires. But we have a beautiful cage. So living life as a material body is like just polishing the cage, while the occupant of this body is being neglected. So yoga is really meant to feed the occupant of the body, just as we feed the body and we stretch the body and we strengthen the body. So also our inner yogi needs strength and nourishment and attention. So this is Vedanta, to get to the point where we learn how to nourish the spirit. So how do we do it? It's really quite simple. Keeping the physical body in shape is a great asset for that. And then on top of that, adding the particularly effective form of meditation, mantra meditation that we practice here in our yoga group here in Columbus. The kirtan is like nourishment for the spirit. And it's amazing that people can experience that immediately, whether or not they have much background in yoga. It is not like chanting Coca-Cola. You know, Srila Prabhupada was asked, why chant Hare Krishna? Why not chant Coca-Cola? He said, just chant Coca-Cola, and when you grow tired, then chant Hare Krishna. Like the biblical statement, you know, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be the name. The name of God is sacred, whatever tradition one may have, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Hinduism or what have you. The name of God is sacred. It is a sound vibration that nourishes the spirit and awakens it to more realization and sensitivity. So our foundational teaching from the Gita is chanting. And if there is an opportunity to get more philosophical background to help understand the spirit, then there's what's called bhakti yoga, or the practice of service in devotion. In the Gita, Krishna said there's a whole chapter devoted to yoga. And he describes the yoga system, the various practices. But then at the end of the chapter, he says, yoginam api sarvesham in the Sanskrit. Yoginam api sarvesham. Sarvesham means all. Of all yogis, madgatena taratmana, one who's connected with me in yoga, is most dear to me and is highest of all. Krishna is the name of God. It means the all-attractive person. And he teaches the Gita. It's interesting, you know, we were talking about the other day, right? 800 million Hindus and 800 million varieties of Hinduism. But the one commonality is that every Hindu will say, yes, Bhagavad Gita is my sacred book, even though they look at it many different ways. I so much appreciate this Bhagavad Gita as it is, because the author just presents it very graphically with the Sanskrit and the synonyms, each verse, in the mood in which it was spoken, without a degree of interpretation. And the essential teaching there is that our service directed towards Krishna will bring us fulfillment in the highest platform of yoga. That's the thesis. So the process of science, yes, doctor here. Science means hypothesis, experiment, and conclusion, right? So this is the hypothesis. We are eternal servants of God by nature, our service capacity being directed to the Supreme will bring us to the highest realizations in yoga. The experiment then is up to the individual. There's really no catechism, nothing to join, nothing to believe, no subscription of faith. It's just an experiment. If instead of serving my body, my mind, and my senses, I direct my service towards pleasing the person who created my body, mind, and senses, I will be more fulfilled. And with that experiment, after the experiment, then you can draw your own conclusion. So for those of us who have practicing bhakti yoga for many years, I know for me it has just been a tremendous boon in my life, and I love sharing it with others. So that's the basic outline of the philosophy of bhakti and yoga, Vedanta. Yes, you can do, the beauty of bhakti is you can do whatever you like to do, just about anything for Krishna. If you're a teacher, you can teach for Krishna. If you have a job, you can work for Krishna. If you're a painter, a musician, or artist, you can do all those things for Krishna. Bhakti is learning the art of how to direct our service for the spiritual purpose. So that's a little outline what I wanted to say this evening. Are there any questions related to this or perhaps other subjects in the area of yoga, Vedanta that you might have? Questions or reflections also? What does this mean to you? Is this relevant? I'm trying to make it. Yes?
Very good question. What's the difference between intelligence and mind? Mind is the neural pathway for our
Experiences. Intelligence means you. Intelligence is above the mind, and that the mind is, you could say, a computer, a functionary piece of equipment. The intelligence is the innate perception of the spirit and the ability of the spirit to discriminate and learn beyond the material. Correct. The mind is just a conduit for the material perceptions, but the intelligence is the ability to discriminate between matter and spirit. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, make sure you're staying on track. And then there are sciences associated with all of these Sankhya divisions of matter. For example, earth, geology, water, chemistry, air, meteorology, fire, maybe you could say nuclear energy or electricity. Ether, I understand, has to do with radio waves. But mind, intelligence, and false ego, the three subtle ones, they also have their science. The science of mind is psychology. Why does a person do this, or why does an entity do this? Like Pavlov's dogs, what prompts actions? But the science of intelligence is philosophy. That is, again, analyzing our existential position. But the science of false ego, this is bhakti. False ego means that the point in which the spiritual being begins to identify with the physical body. And it's at that crucial junction that we take either the path of materialism or spirituality. And false ego means falsely identifying with that which we are not. We are not this physical body, but we think we are. That's false ego. But the real ego is I am a spiritual being inside a physical body. So the science of false ego is bhakti. Through exercising our position as eternal servants of the Supreme, we experience our spiritual existence. Is that okay? A very good question. Yes.
I found the most difficult challenge in my practice is staying grounded in both, and then even down to you were talking about the level that's just atoms. I have that one down pretty good, but it's like I've heard it called like vertical schizophrenia, right? Like existing on so many different planes at once.
Right.
And I feel like if I suffer on this plane, I run to the next level up, and if I'm having a hard time there, then I practice karma yoga and things, in this realm or whatever. But I wonder if you could talk at all about like, towing that line.
Right. Have you heard this phrase, code switch? It's like when you have to act one way in one environment and then another way in another environment.
This is part of spirituality in the material world, or in the biblical sense, it's like to be in the world but not of it. The whole Bhagavad Gita. Let me ask, who here has read Bhagavad Gita? Okay, how many? Let me ask, how many to whom it is new? How many of you are new to it? Okay, so everybody's a little familiar. You know the warrior Arjuna. Okay, so Arjuna's dilemma is he's got to fight, and he doesn't want to fight because he decides it's not worth it to win the spoils of the battle to kill his relative. But the teacher, Krishna, says, no, you got to fight. And then he proceeds to give him all of these reasons why, most of which are spiritual. So the conclusion of the Gita is Arjuna is ready to fight. But his purpose in fighting has changed completely. So his external activities don't change, but his purpose behind them does. So that's the essential message of the Gita, so that we can be consistent in our responsibilities in this world with a different perspective of why we're doing it. This is called Dharma, or Sanatana Dharma, to perform our spiritual duties while we're meeting all our material responsibilities. The example is given of a coconut, that if you put a coconut in the sun long enough, the inner content begins to shrink and become detached from the shell. To the point where you can pick it up and rattle it and know. So we want to become like coconuts in the sun. We're doing all of our duties externally, but internally we're becoming more detached. And the process of bhakti is described that it brings us to this level of detachment automatically. It's from the Bhagavad Purana. It said, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayodhita. That by practicing bhakti in devotion to Krishna, automatically knowledge and detachment arise. So in much of yoga practice in school, the goal is knowledge, or the goal is detachment. But in bhakti, these are byproducts, and we don't have to separately endeavor for them. So yes, the idea is if our purpose in our work, just like Arjuna's purpose in his fight, is to serve Krishna, then we're able to maintain a much steadier position. This is the point. Okay? Yes, Krishna, please.
Gives the analogy of a chariot, where the 5 horses are the 5 senses. You could probably explain the analogy far more eloquently than I can.
It's relevant, yes. So imagine a chariot with 5 horses. Yes, something like that.
I can imagine.
Okay.
This is not, by the way, the purpose of this picture, but but if each of the senses represents, each of the horses represents one of our 5 senses, and they are each reined to the driver. The driver is the mind, and the passenger is the intelligence. I'm sorry, the driver. Let me try again. The senses are the horses. The reins are the mind. Yes. And the driver is the intelligence. And the passenger is the soul. Right. And you thought well, Arjuna is the passenger, Krishna is the driver, and the reins are the mind. Not in this picture, but in our visualized chariot, okay? So again, if the senses, the horses, are out of control, then the reins don't work, the driver can't steer, and the passenger is subject to going wherever the horses whimsically take. You see? But if the driver, the intelligence, is able to control the reins, control the mind, the senses are under its control, and the passenger, the soul, will get to the desired destination. Okay? Thank you. That's the idea. I think you would have explained it better, but anyway.
Ashtanga yoga for 4 years. But sometimes I find that the byproducts of Ashtanga yoga, you feel good, you have have a lot more energy.
Mhm.
You also look good.
Mhm.
And sometimes that may result, I have found that it results in more attachment to the body. Because you know how you feel when you practice Ashtanga Yoga well,
Mhm.
and you really want to get back to that place. So the motivation to start Ashtanga Yoga was grounded in health.
Mhm.
Let me be more healthy and use this body effectively in Krishna's service.
Mhm.
But somewhere along the way, the motivation becomes again more towards the body.
Mhm. Well, it's just like if you are an Uber driver and that's your profession and you take good care of your car, then
That's constructive for your career, isn't it? So there's certainly no harm in taking care of the car. But on the other hand, if the Uber driver spends all day just polishing, detailing, cleaning, and never picks up a passenger, then what is the use of, right? So yes, there's no harm to our spiritual life to take good care of our physical vessel. But if it becomes our preoccupation or our only goal in our practice, then that, yes, we're going to be incomplete. Okay, good question. Thank you. All right, anything else? Okay. Yes. From Guitar God? Is that all right? Would you like to give some? Could you hand me that? Thank you. This is a version of Bhagavad Gita that my spiritual master wrote in Bengali many years ago, and I just worked with my friend, Sri Radha's father in Calcutta, to translate it to English poetry. He put it in Bengali poetry. This is its first edition in English poetry. So I could read a few excerpts just briefly if you like. This is on the subject of the yoga system. So Krishna has described the process of yoga, which in its strictest sense means you leave the world. You go up to the Himalayas, you get a cave, you get a certain kind of seat. You have to be completely separated from everybody, completely fixed in your meditation. And his pupil, Arjuna, says this: "O Krishna, Madhusudana, this system you've explained, designed for realization on the transcendental plane, appears to be entirely impossible to me. My mind is so unsteady that it changes constantly. O Krishna, do you really think a yogi can prevail? The mind is so robust that it seems guaranteed to fail. The agitated, stubborn mind refuses to give in. To manage it seems harder than to supervise the wind." Lord Krishna replies, "O mighty son of Kunti, yes, the restless mind is stout, and conquering the mind is very hard, without a doubt. And yet, if your mundane pursuits turn spiritual instead, by practicing detachment, you will soon come out ahead. Although it can be difficult to check the mind's demands, it nonetheless is possible for one who understands. By taking my detailed advice and trying cent per cent, one gains self-realization and perfects what he attempts." So, difficult to control the mind, but possible if we understand what we're doing. So then Arjuna asks a really pertinent question. I think a very human question any one of us would have asked. "O Krishna, what becomes of yogis striving for perfection who deviate and later choose a more mundane direction? Distracted from the spiritual success that they had sought, bewildered yogis also fail in this world, do they not? Do they become some riven clouds the winds can push about? O mighty armed Lord Krishna, help me pierce and shed this doubt." So in other words, he's saying, if I give up my material career for spiritual pursuits and fail in my spiritual pursuits, then I've lost everything, material and spiritual. To which Krishna says, "Arjuna, listen now about the fallen yogi's fate. For endless dangers in this world face every candidate. A yogi is protected both in this life or the next, for acting in auspiciousness will always bring success. Should yogis fall, their piety still brings them godly bliss, for they are born in wealthy homes or those of righteousness. Or sometimes fallen yogis reappear in their next life as children of a learned transcendental man and wife. Though such a birth is rare indeed, the soul who so appears remains with saintly people and has nothing more to fear. O son of Kuru, such a fallen yogi then revives the consciousness accumulated in his former lives. With fresh intelligence, determined yogis then progress and carry on with their practice to their ultimate success. So there's no loss, is what he's saying. If we try for spiritual perfection and fail, in our next life we continue. I was, in my generation, some of you might remember the advertisement, if I only have one life to live, let me live it as a blonde. It was a hair dye product. But through Vedanta, through knowledge, we begin to look at our lives as a continuum and not just this one particular chapter. So, in trying for spiritual life, even if we're not fully successful, we'll guarantee our next life will be even a better opportunity to pursue. So in this way, Krishna gives us some guarantee. It was Emerson who said this, Western world is this peculiar place where people think they only live one life. So, all right, any other thoughts? Yes, sir. Right.
I was meditating for an hour a day. I was waking up, every morning at the right times. But I realized that my spirituality could not touch anybody else. It could not affect anybody else. It was for me and my own. It was a very calm period, but it almost felt lacking in that I could not.
Just to help everyone here.
Yeah, it felt lacking in that I could not express that spirituality, serve others, and do those things. So what is the point of removal if you're removing yourself from the rest of the animal that we all are?
Right, very good. Well, this is the reason why the Bhagavad Gita is considered the yoga textbook, because it
Explains all various types of yoga. So this particular chapter is dedicated to the path of conventional yoga, which does require removing oneself to a remote place, etc. It's meant to be a transition from worldly life to spirituality, but it's a very difficult one. And although it's explained in the Gita, it's not recommended. Does that make sense? In other words, the Gita is a comprehensive book on the subject. So here's this path of yoga, but it's difficult, and there's better ways. Exactly. And again, the goal of that removal of oneself is detachment. So you experienced during COVID a little bit of that monkish life, as you put it. And it wasn't all that fun, I'm gathering. You were glad when it was over.
Actually, hell went over.
Oh, you got used to it.
I got very used to it. I was with my family, and that's my work. That was
All this crazy stuff
Wow.
in a supposedly nice area.
Mm.
And I was very depressed for a long time. But what I had to do was relearn the things that I had learned during that year in which I could. And so to me, that was saying I have to be back out there. I have to learn the suffering so that I can have a even stronger spirit soul, because it was easy when I was alone. It was very easy.
I see.
And so it got harder, but I knew that I had to grow to that next level to firmly be in that, because it wasn't the real me unless I'm around others.
Interesting. So you gained that realization, then found the conflict in the world, but it's inspired
I felt the conflict in the world, yes.
Something that's been helpful for me in that regard is to use the early morning hours for spiritual practice. And of course, conversely, that requires going to bed at an early hour, which is probably harder, even harder than getting up. Yes, then you can naturally get in sync with the.
no matter what medicine,
Yeah.
wherever I was sitting.
Yeah.
It's not like that, but
Uh-huh.
I feel like I learned a lot from
Mhm.
out the world.
Mhm.
And,
Good. Well, to take it a step further, there's this beautiful verse in chapter 2 of the Gita that what is Yanisha Sarva Bhutanam Yasyam Jagrati Bhutani. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the yogi. And what is the time of awakening for the average person is night for the yogi. So the time to, the 24 hours are divided into various muhurtas or sections, and they're influenced by the three modes of nature. If you read Gita, you know, there's goodness, passion, and ignorance. They're like red, blue, and yellow. That form all other colors, the three primary colors. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. So the goodness hours begin at 2 a.m. Particularly, that's from 2 to 6 is the primo time for goodness, and then by around 10 it turns into passion. That's the time you work, you eat, knock it dead. You know? And then when the evening comes, it gradually fades into ignorance. So the earlier we go to bed, the less we're influenced by the mode of ignorance. And then the earlier we rise, the more we revel in the mode of goodness. So that's a discipline that you can apply, anyone can apply. Really the hard part is getting out of this consciousness that I worked hard all day, now I can enjoy. Now I can watch something, relax, do whatever I want, you know. And I stay up till 9, 10, 11, 12, because this is my enjoyment time. But the consequence is that when I wake up in the morning, there's like no time but to have a piece of toast and run out the door. So we get right into passion and we just sleep right through goodness. You see? So the idea is that the discipline of saying, okay, I'm going to minimize my contact with ignorance and go to bed as early as possible. 9 o'clock. I mean, during the COVID time when there wasn't all the ordinary obligations, it was a great opportunity for my wife and I. We'd go to bed very early, more or less like with the sunset, we'd get up early and do our spiritual practices, yoga. And that was very nice. And yeah, I kind of miss it too. But that's a discipline that really is so very helpful for spiritual growth. And it's a very tangible one, you know. I like to tell my students that nothing good happens after 9 o'clock. PM. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, if we stay up before, if we go to bed at 9 p.m., then all kinds of good things happen after 9 a.m. It's like a vaccination. You know, if we give our morning hours to spirituality, then all throughout the day, it gets back to your question, Calvin, that we remember our spiritual practice much more easily because we've really invested in it. We set ourselves up before going out and dealing with the world. All right.
If you talk about time and then sacrifice, so that's not the official time that set by daylight saving.
Right.
When they switch to daylight saving time,
One of the sides switch too, right?
That's right. Yes, go with the sun. Okay, yes, Steve.
So it's like,
I've tried to cultivate the habit of practicing japa meditation, but each time I try to do that, it's like I can at most maintain the streak for a few days, but then I fall off the wagon. Sometimes it's like I'm able to do like small things in spiritual practice, like offer akti or play my sitar and chant Hare Krishna at the same time and stuff, but to actually sit down and dhyana mudra and close my eyes and just concentrate all my being onto the image of the Supreme Lord, that's something that I still haven't been able to sustain for more than a few days. So how can a yogi basically prevent himself from falling off the wagon with those things? I've always had a very hard time with it.
That's a very pertinent question.
Verse real quick. Anyway, I'll just reference it. Yuktahara viharasya. That the Sanskrit word for this is yukta, which means regularity. Let's see. Yuktahara 617. So here's what the Gita advises on that point. One who is regulated in habits of eating, sleeping, work, and recreation can mitigate all material miseries by practicing the yoga system. So the key is regulation. That's related to the mind controlling the senses, the reins controlling the horses. That if we are disciplined in our habits, that contributes to the strength to maintain this additional layer of spiritual attempts and meditation. Again, the morning hours are precious for this purpose. So if you schedule your chanting for early in the morning, then you'll have a much better chance of making it a habit. I can just tell you, personally, I have a habit of chanting almost first thing after I get up in the morning. And as soon as I get up and chant for a fair period of time, and that has become such a joy in my life, I don't want to do without it. You become a little addicted to it. So that's the goal of bhakti, to become addicted to spiritual practices. And it's very hard to get addicted to sitting and making your mind quiet.
It's very hard to on point one.
Yeah.
It's depending on the mood that day, like maybe something that they upset you, and then
Yeah.
Fixated on it for a couple of minutes, or something bad happened, someone in the world to work up over that.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to throw another verse at you. One who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So when the mind is disturbed, we have these two options. We can try to deal with the cause of disturbance, or we can tolerate it. So the Gita is saying a big part of yoga practice is learning to tolerate the machinations of the mind. As my teacher put it, don't eat the bananas of the mind. And it will produce so many things, and just the ability to look at it but not act on it is at yoga.
I've already felt to a certain extent, but it's especially after attending frequent lectures and listening to him. That's gotten me some of the
So, like Arjuna hears, it takes determination and practice. But we think how much time we spend scrolling on Facebook or whatever. Just diverting a little bit of time, a little investment in the spiritual practice. I'm dealing with a semi-frozen shoulder, and my therapist said, just like 5 minutes a day, do this exercise. That'll make a difference. And it's like that, very much like that in spiritual life. We're very accustomed to the material plane. So 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, we put ourselves on the spiritual plane. Even if our mind is not cooperating, so what? This is where the intelligence takes over for the mind, from the mind. Okay, in spite of my mind's protest, I'm going to do this because with my intelligence, I can see I'm going to draw more out of life on the spiritual path. So,
word for
I know that manas is mind. Those things as you previously stated, are separate. I just want to make sure I got the right words for
That's
that.
right. Buddhi or Medasa, they're kind of masculine and feminine forms of intelligence. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
me,
I want to talk about, it made me think about it when you spoke about Ashtanga. I've heard the 4 paths of yoga be described as Ashtanga, Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti. Is it a line? Are they intertwined in some way? Is it vertical?
It's connected to the principles of Indian philosophy. It starts with karma mimamsa. That's just understanding action and reaction. And then the next 4 are about jnana.
what is it? The Nyaya logic, atomic theory, and Sankhya. Yeah. Then actually Ashtanga is not 4 but 3 are on the Jnana yoga, and then Ashtanga is this Patanjali, the old yoga system, and then finally Bhakti is Vedanta. So yeah, there is a continuum starting karma, jnana, Ashtanga, and Bhakti.
But when I think of the four, I think of Sangha and Yama being so strong. And I think of Karma and Bhakti as not so strong as
Action.
action going forward.
Mhm. Mhm.
So are you saying that there's karmas on are these rungs? Like you started at karma and then I would do someone for
Mhm.
then gain knowledge.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Ashtanga is the action, taking the action to do.
Well, yeah, Ashtanga is beyond karma in that you're doing the exercise meditation for a spiritual purpose. Yeah. Yeah. Right, but there's a deeper purpose to yoga. Again, their exercise, as Krishna Jivana was pointing out, it keeps the body in shape, but we have a spiritual purpose and that only comes in the bhakti stage. Ashtanga can limit you in that respect because it doesn't go any farther than the yamas and niyamas. But I'm not a scholar of Patanjali, but I have a friend who is. He was saying there's a tremendous amount of bhakti in Patanjali.
You don't stop practicing
Right.
Ashtanga when you start practicing.
No.
You don't complete a course.
Exactly. Yeah. The karma level, especially in India, uh, people practice religion. And we see that in this country too. People practice religion for the purpose of getting something back. Right? Like if you're right with the Lord, then you'll be rich. If you're not rich, you're not right with the Lord. So send money today. In the Bhagavad Purana, it said that religion, spirituality should never be performed for economic gain. Dharmasya hapyavargasya. But if in the course of your practice of spirituality you happen to get money, that's okay. Just don't use it for the purpose of sense enjoyment. So the karma level is very crude in the sense that people will look at it and say, okay, if I do something pious, I'll get something back. It's only for the purpose of enhancing enjoyment of this world. That's why it's the lowest rung. It's just, I'm going to get a good reaction if I do this action. So it's always motivated, and it's very selfish, and it has nothing to do with spirituality. That's why, but understanding how karma works is important. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes people want to understand, well, what happened in my past life that got me in this one? But there's no sorting it out. If you wake up and your house is on fire, the first question is, how did it catch on fire? Let me investigate. First thing is, let me get out of this situation. So we're on fire in this material world, identified with a body that is doomed and not knowing any other identity. So how do we get out of the fire? Then we have to go up to higher level. But even Gyan is self-centered. Gyan is, let me get knowledge, and then I'll decide whether or not to have a relationship with God. Let me figure this all out, and then I'll decide.
It's not, I want to learn about God and learn about practice because of myself.
If through that cultivation of knowledge we come to the point of establishing a relationship with God, then that knowledge has brought us to, yeah. So it is one method, but we can also just go right to the point of bhakti and develop that relationship. In the Gita, Krishna says, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavam mam prapadnate. After cultivating jnana for many lifetimes, Bahunam janmanam, many births, one comes to the point of bhakti. So if you know the purpose of cultivating knowledge, you can just get right to it. You can take the stairs to the Empire State Building, or you can take the elevator. And scratch your nose like that, or like this. Yeah, bhakti is a direct path, and it brings knowledge as a byproduct, just like it brings detachment as a byproduct. Okay, anything else? That's good. Go ahead.
Your name's sir?
I'm Brian.
Brian. Hi. You got a fantastic question.
When in your journey have you questioned faith? And has there been times when it has been more questioned or less? I assume as you progress in the journey, the faith has been questioned less. But what did you do during those times? What did it look like? How did it feel? And how did you correct your faith so that you could feel it in your heart?
The science of bhakti describes two kinds of faith. First is called
Dao, Shraddha. The word Shraddha means faith in Sanskrit. So a Dao is preliminary faith. So one has a general notion that God exists. There's some general idea that there's somebody better than me in the world. I'm sorry, Christopher Hitchens or whomever. You know? There's some notion that God exists. And then in the practice of bhakti, the stages are, by that little bit of faith, we providentially, mystically come in association of other people with a little interest. And that leads us to the practices of bhakti, the chanting and the avoidance of certain things that are very entangling in this world, and study of Bhagavad Gita, things like that. It's called bhajana kriya, or spiritual practice. And from that comes the next stage, which is called anartha nivritti. Now, anartha means things that are troublesome, like addictions or bad habits, self-defeating things, staying up all night. You know, and nivritti means to get rid of them. So through the practices of bhakti, enough pleasure comes out of it that bad habits start to dissipate. So that takes us to the next stage of faith, which is called nishtha. That is a kind of unbreakable faith. And it's not a result of conviction through philosophical study. It's a result of seeing bad habits dissipate. Things that we might have wanted to get rid of for years, and we can never get rid of them no matter what we do. All of a sudden, they just kind of lose their grip on us. So in my journey, I had that experience, and it was quite a shock. But it was so easy because I was having a good time practicing and chanting and so forth. It was fun. And then all of a sudden, I found myself becoming a little better person than I used to be. So that brought me to that faith that, yeah, this process really works. Again, it's experiment, hypothesis, conclusion. So this beautiful thing about bhakti is no charge, no commitment, karma back guarantee. If you don't like it, you go right back to where you were, no problem. And we're just sharing, hey, we have had this wonderful experience. These devotees are opening up their homes and making so much effort to encourage people. And, Prem Sindhu and Leela just give so much of themselves. Why? It's just because it's a lot of fun. And sharing it with other people is a lot of fun. And people take it or don't take it, it's still fun. So this is nishtha, when you've had such a transformation from bhakti that it's just mind-blowing. And so there's, again, not okay, I believe this and this and this. This just isn't part of it. It's all experiential. Okay. Is that all right? Any others want to comment on that very thoughtful question? I'm not sure you have any thoughts. Okay.
Even when the faith is questioned, there are two things that get you back to it. One is the reciprocation you have with Krishna, that relationship that you establish with Krishna, that gives you the intelligence or the faith to keep going. And the other is, at some point you realize that bhakti is very much about the internal emotion, not the externals, not what I wear, none of that. It's about that feeling that we have inside in relationship to the Lord, that permeates with everyone. Krishna is in each one of you. And once we get that emotion, it's hard to run away from it because we tasted it. And that gets us, sustains us through those periods when we might be questioning faith.
Right. In other words, if we feel down, we always know when to secure. Well, let me offer something to Krishna. And this giving
Krishna, when we give to Krishna, Krishna gives us enlightenment, happiness within. And when we feel that happiness, we want to give more to Krishna. And when we give more to Krishna, He wants to give us more happiness. This is called Nitya Yukta Upasate. This ongoing, endless loving relationship between the soul and the Supreme. But it's predicated on service. So that service is always accessible. We are always serving something or somebody. So consciously turn it towards the Supreme and then feel the result.
That's nice to try one thing.
I am the servant of our hosts and all of you.
absorb what the seat can bear.
This is a funny story, so I wanted to share. Many of you might have come across Prabhu. He's really tall in the temple. So he started getting into Bhakti Yoga, and one day he got tickets to the Ohio State football game. Those of you who've been to a game, you know the energy in the stadium. So he gets into the game, he has great seats, the marching band is playing, there's so much energy, and he's thinking, this is fun. and chanting seems like it's an austerity sometimes, right? So he's thinking, wow, this is fun, like, is Krishna really there? Like in his beginning days, he was having that question. And out of 80,000 people in the stadium, the person who sits in front of him has a t-shirt that has a picture of Jagannath on his back.
Oh.
So the entire game he sat looking at the picture of Jagannath, and he was like, Krishna is definitely there. Because the moment that question rose in his mind, within 5 minutes that person came and sat. So that's what I'm talking about, reciprocation. It's really inconceivable.
Yeah. There was a young man who was living in a bhakti ashram, and he decided, oh, I miss my old life, I really like fishing. So he left the ashram and he got his pole and went out fishing. Threw in the line. And then he started pulling and he felt a tug. And he's pulling, and then pulled up with a boot. And inside the boot was a Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. So that's the thing, if we make some attempt to connect with Krishna, Krishna never forgets that. We may try to change our mind, but Krishna will always remember that. And they carry, even if we never do anything else, in the next life we pick up where we left off. It's like a deposit in a permanent bank account. Okay, very good. Anything else?
Sorry if I have to do that.
I wanted to so on the topic of faith, a couple things. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, you cannot give up something inferior without taking something superior. Repression only works for so long, and sometimes the dam is going to break. So until you have a better alternative, you can't fully experience that. But we may try to give up our bad habits, and we don't have the taste of bhakti, the sufficient taste of bhakti to develop good enough habits to get that sufficient taste. So it seems like a catch-22 almost. But what I've been told is that if I stay with other people in the association of those who are at that level, who they've been able to control their senses and they're actually experiencing that taste, then they keep me in it, even if I don't want to be in it like themselves. Just by being around those people, they serve as the inspiration for staying on the path, for keeping it there. There's one story where one of the students of Srila Prabhupada didn't really like the devotees who he was living with, and he asked for Srila Prabhupada's permission to go and sit in one holy place in India, just chant, just keep chanting and chanting. And Prabhupada didn't really want to do that because he knew it wouldn't be good for him, because he wasn't at that stage he could just leave the world. But he kept relenting, so eventually Srila Prabhupada gave in, and so this devotee went and sat, just tried to chant for a couple of days, and a couple of days after he left, because he didn't have the sufficient inspiration to keep going. The other externals kept talking at him. So that's another way to keep the faith up, is if you're staying with others who do have that faith, that gets transmitted. So even if you don't feel it, you know that it works because you see other people succeeding on their things. You can get good habits that way.
One is judged by the company they keep.
Yeah, you have 9 devotees, and you hang around 9 devotees soon.
That's why the Sangha is so nice. Just whatever opportunity we have to come get together here and talk about Krishna. It's you see this time of year the birds are migrating, the geese. They always fly in this V formation. You know why they do that? The one in front pushes down, creates an updraft that lifts up the ones behind. So they naturally gravitate to this formation where they're getting little lifts from the strokes in front. And the poor guy in front is so if one bird goes down, the others, there's nothing they can do about it. But together, they progress. So Sangha is like that. Just as Rancho says, we keep associating with spiritually minded people. It helps our own development. So thank you, Leela and Prema Prabhus, for making this Sangha possible. So nice to be here with such spiritually minded people.
Okay, so now we have a little more kirtan, or what's next on the program? All right. Hare Krishna. Thank you.